Hi guys, it's H. So I haven't come on and talked about any history or classics in a really long time, and I miss it like crazy. So my recent book that I got is from Barnes & Noble, is A Christmas Carol. It is another one of their collectible classics books. It's beautiful. It is red and gold, just like, I think it's supposed to emulate the original book that Charles Dickens wrote. There's a story that they tell about the original Christmas Carol, and that when he wrote A Christmas Carol, that he wanted it to be a gift to the world. So it was, I believe, the first book that was ever printed in color. So when you would open the page, it would have green and red printing, and that was brand new, and it was very, very expensive. So, A Christmas Carol in prose, being a ghost story of Christmas, to give the work its full title, was the first and most popular of Dickens' series of Christmas books. The volume, published by Chapman and Hall on the 19th of December in 1843, was an immediate success. In the initial print run of 6,000 copies sold out within a matter of days. Dickens hoped that the book would clear his debts with Chapman and Hall, but the lavish production, including 4 woodcuts, 4 color plates by John Leech, meant Dickens only made £230 from the first print. Worse was to follow when a plagiarized version of the book appeared in January 1844. Dickens took the publishers of the pirated edition to court, but even though he won the case, he found himself liable for costs of around £700. When the guilty party declared bankruptcy, his bitterness at the whole affair resurfaced years later when he came to describe the labyrinth and corrupt workings of the Court of Chancery in Bleak House. So, to be clear, £700 in American dollars is $977. So, in 1844, its value was $36,207. So that is a hefty sum. And Dickens was going through it at the minute with his publishers and trying to get his foot off the ground. Dickens' Ghosts and Christmas. A Christmas Carol concerns a cold-hearted miser, Ebenezer Scrooge, who is visited on Christmas Eve by the ghost of his dead partner, Jacob Marley. During the night, 3 further spirits, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, also appear to Scrooge, each holding a mirror to his behavior and highlighting the unhappiness. The ghost of Christmas future, the most sinister of the 3 specters, also reveals the gloomy consequences for Scrooge. And those like Bob Cratchit and his son, Tiny Tim, whose livelihoods depended upon him, should he fail to mend his ways. In addition to Scrooge's own plight, the story also addresses a wider social issue, particularly in the scene where the ghost of Christmas present shows Scrooge the 2 children, ignorance and want, from the foldings of its robe. It brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at his feet and clung upon the outside of his garment. In stave 3, both children are the direct result of the poverty afflicting much of Victorian society. Now, Dickens was a fierce defender of children, and he took every opportunity to highlight the disastrous implications of neglect, financial hardship, and a lack of education on their well-being. More than an advocate, he fought for these kids in this society every day. He walked the streets of London, they say, every night for hours, and just walked and watched. And he saw what was really happening, and he was brave. He was a middle-class person coming up with a name for himself in this time period. And he was talking about what society didn't want to talk about. He took a lot of heat, and his bravery for telling the stories that he tells is insurmountable. Dickens had written about Christmas and the supernatural before in the Gabriel Grubb episode of the Pickwick Papers in 1837, but it was a Christmas Carol which truly caught the public's imagination. The association between Christmas, the supernatural, and Dickens have lasted ever since. Names and dialogue from the story have also entered the language. Those who dislike Christmas are even given the name Scrooge, but they do, of course, have the option of replying with Scrooge's vehement "Bah, humbug," to any call for seasonal good cheer. So, Charles Dickens' conception of Christmas is fundamentally connected to the idea of feasting, which is profoundly expressive of the human happiness that he believed the festival should promote. It plugs directly into the medieval and pagan idea of defying the evil forces apparently overtaking nature, as well as a storing up of resources to face the wintry fight ahead. For Dickens, it is the coming together of people around a table, the celebration of their humanity, the sharing of their bounty, the reward of indulgence, even if that is only once a year. That is the essence of the meal, for his ability to render simple food and drink overwhelmingly desirable is astonishing, but behind the sensuality always lies the symbol. The preparation is life-enhancing as the consumption. The party always takes place at Uncle George's house, he writes in A Christmas Carol, the first Christmas piece he wrote. But Grandmama sends me. The party always takes place at Uncle George's house, he writes in A Christmas Dinner, the first Christmas piece he wrote. But Grandmama sends in most of the good things, and Grandpapa always will toddle down all the way to Newgate Market to buy the turkey, which he engages a porter to bring home behind him in triumph, always insisting on the man's being rewarded with a glass of spirits, over and above his hire to drink a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. To Aunt George, as to Grandmama, she is very secret and mysterious for 2 or 3 days beforehand, but not sufficiently so to prevent rumors getting afloat that she has purchased a beautiful new cap with pink ribbons for each of the servants, together with sundry books and pens, knives and pencil cases for the younger branches, to say nothing of divers secrets, in addition to the order originally given by Aunt George at the pastry cook's, such as another dozen of mince pies for the dinner and a large plum cake for the children. On Christmas Eve, Grandmama is always in excellent spirits, and after employing all the children during the day in the stoning of plums and all that insists regularly every year, on Uncle George coming down into the kitchen, taking off his coat and stirring the pudding for half an hour or so, which Uncle George good-humoredly does, to the vociferous delight of the children and the servants. The valiant struggle of the Cratchits, the impoverished hard-working family in the Dickens A Christmas Carol, to make their meager ingredients feels like a feast, is triumphantly successful in one of the most affecting sections of the novel. There never was such a goose, Bob said. He didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavor, size, and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration, eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes. It was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, surveying one small atom of a bone upon the dish, they hadn't ate it all at last, yet everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onions into the eyebrows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Miss Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have got over the wall of the backyard and stole it while they were merry with the goose. A supposition at which the two young Cratchits became livid. All sorts of horror were supposed. Hollow, a great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper. A smell like a washing day that was in the cloth. A smell like an eating house and a pastry cook's next door to each other, with a laundress next door to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute, Miss Cratchit entered, flushed, but smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quarter of ignited brandy and bedlight with Christmas holly stuck into the top. Oh, a wonderful pudding, Bob Cratchit said, and calmly too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind. She would confess she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been a flat heresy to do so, and Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. Bob and Martha Cratchit have somehow ensured that on the pitiful wages he has squeezed out of Scrooge, they have on their table, in reduced form, but still there, what every family in England expected to have on Christmas Day. The goose had been established as Christmas fare since the time of Elizabeth I, although it was a luxury only affordable by a poor man if he belonged to the Goose Club, paying in so much a week and of course being cheated along the way. The temperance movement waged a war against the consumption of alcohol and took aim at the goose clubs, which were often equivalent to pubs and which lured their members into spending their rudimentary salaries on the demon drink. So, goose clubs are held at hundreds of public houses in London. The members pay a shilling a week for 8 or 10 weeks before Christmas, and in addition to a goose, are generally entitled to a bottle of gin for their 10 shillings. A goose like the Cratchits would be cooked at the baker's. Few working class households had ovens, so the baker, for a small consideration, would leave his alight on Christmas Day. This is where the younger Cratchits go to fetch the goose. Thanks to the influx in poultry from France and Germany in the 1840s, geese became much more readily available. Turkey, too, had a long tradition on Christmas consumption.